Hello everyone, welcome to the first episode of Primus Academy that's actually on the Primus Academy channel. The first 3 episodes were done on my personal main channel, Primus Prime 22, but I like doing it, so I wanted to give it its own dedicated channel, so here we are. But our first video for the channel here today is going to be a bit different from my usual Primus Academy videos. When doing, historical research, you're going to come across lots and lots of primary sources, and a lot of this stuff is very, very interesting, if you're into history. It sort of helps you give insight to the lives of people who lived at that time. And you might not always have a good place to stick it in your research video. So I'll sometimes take some excerpts of sources I find that I think are just interesting, and just read them. That's really what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be reading some sources I found that I think are very interesting. I'm using a book called Reading the American Past, Selected Historical Documents, compiled by Michael P. Johnson. And on page 315, we have some excerpts from Actually, this runs from about 1865 to 1870. 1865 to 1870 of excerpts from a newspaper called the Christian Recorder, which is a Philadelphia-based newspaper. And that time period, that's the end of the American Civil War. That's the beginning of the Reconstruction era. That's when many black Americans were freed from slavery after the Civil War. And we all know the story about, slaves, about how they were torn from their families and stuff like that. But, there's the question about what happened after slavery was abolished. Did families get put back together? And really, if you did, you were lucky. But in this group of excerpts, we're going to see how some people tried to use newspapers and, just sent out almost like you'd see a wanted ad or something like that, like, looking for my family. And, even though it's a Philadelphia paper, these excerpts, really, these articles, I can't think of the right word for these ads looking for their families sort of span across the United States. So, I think I would just read this stuff for you, in case you guys are the type of people that find this stuff interesting. Because I'm reading an excerpt, there might not be much on the screen. It might be a still photo, it might be a slideshow, who knows. But, here we go. Advertisements from the Christian Recorder, 1865 to 1870. January 25th, 1865. So this would be before the Civil War ended, but, when the Civil War is on its last days. Information wanted. Jacob Brown wishes to find his sister and friends from whom he was sold about 8 years ago. He belonged to George Fisher of Hardy County, Virginia, near Moorfield. His sister, Louisa, who was sold with him into Louisiana, had been back home once. She left 3 children, named respectively Peter, Isaac, and Moses. She is in New Orleans and is anxious to hear of them. Another sister remained, named Arena, or Arenier, whose husband was named Paul Peterson. His uncles were Richard and Jacob Cassim, owned by McCoy. Any person knowing anything of them will confer a great favor upon the undersigned, who is their younger brother, and who escaped from imprisonment in the jail at Winchester, Virginia, by writing such information as shall unite those separated by slavery. Respectively, Jacob Brown, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. July 29th, 1865. Information wanted. Information is wanted of Cairo Robinson, who left Liberty, Clay County, Missouri, about 4 years ago, to join the Union Army at Wyandotte. Wyandotte? I'm sorry, guys. You know how a lot of geographic names in the United States are based off Native American etymology, and I obviously don't have any experience with Native American languages. Kansas, and he has not been heard from since. Any information of his whereabouts will be thankfully received by his wife, Miss Fanny Robinson, care of P.C. Cooper, Box 1129, Davenport, Iowa. August 5th, 1865. Information wanted. Edith Chappell left Columbia, South Carolina, on February 20th, 1865, with the army of General Sherman, from the residence of Miss Henry Lyons. Her aunt, Fanny Bostick, can be found with Mr. A. L. Hart, 827 Lombard Street, Philadelphia. November 18th, 1865. Notice. Information wanted of my 2 brothers Nelson and Wesley Smothers, and my 6 sisters Mary Ann Russell, Harriet Matilda, Elizabeth, Henrietta, and Cornelia Smothers. They formerly belonged to Ruth Rigla, who resided 2 miles from the old Harper's Ferry Road, Frederick County, Maryland. In 1837, we were all sold to South Carolina. I have not seen them since. Any information will be thankfully received by Reverend Cyrus Bowie, Oswego, New York. March 10th, 1866. Information wanted. By a mother concerning her children. Mrs. Elizabeth Williams, who now resides in Marysville, California, was formerly owned, together with her children, Lydia, William, Allen, and Parker, by one John Petty, who lived about 6 miles from the town of Woodbury, Franklin County, Tennessee. At that time, she was the wife of Sandy Rucker, and was familiarly known as Betsy, sometimes called Betsy Petty. About 25 years ago, the mother was sold to Mr. Marshall Stroud, by whom some 12 or 14 years later she was, for the second time since purchased by him, taken to Arkansas. She has never seen the above-named children since. Any information given concerning them, however, will be gratefully received by one whose love for her children survives the bitterness and hardships of many long years spent in slavery. Preachers in the neighborhood of Woodbury, Tennessee, are especially requested to make an inquiry, and communicate any information they may deem valuable, either by letter or through the columns of the Recorder. April 7th, 1866. Information wanted of the children of Hagar Outlaw, who went from Wake Forest. 3 of them, their names being Cherry, Vinnie, and Mills Outlaw, were bought by Abram Hester. Noah Outlaw was taken to Alabama by Joseph Turner Hillsborough. John Outlaw was sold to George Vaughn. Eli Outlaw was sold by Joseph Outlaw. He acted as watchman for old David Outlaw. Thomas Rembry Outlaw was taken away by William Outlaw. Julia Outlaw was sold in New Orleans by Dr. Outlaw. I live in Raleigh, and I hope they will think enough of their mother to come and look for her, as she is growing old and needs help. She will be glad to see them again at, and then it says illegible word. The place is healthy, and they can all do well here. As the hand of time steals over me now so rapidly, I wish to see my dear ones once more clasped to their mother's heart as in days of yore. Come to the capital of North Carolina, and you will find your mother there, eagerly awaiting her loved ones. Hugh Outlaw, if you should find any or all of my children, you will do me an incalculable favor by immediately informing them that their mother still lives. May 5th, 1866. Information wanted of the oldest daughter Jane's children. One son by the name of Andrew, another by the name of Ransom, and another by the name of George, who were taken away from me and sold when they were very small. Also 2 others, twins, one called Martha Ann and the other had no name. The name of the father of these children is Washington. He belonged to a man in Franklin, Kentucky, whose name was Joseph Kearney. The mother of these children belonged to a man in Franklin County, Kentucky, by the name of Seth Ward. Her name is Charity Ward, wife of Washington Kearney, who was killed by a fall from a wagon. Any information concerning any of the above will be thankfully received by addressing W.A. Bookram, Franklinton, North Carolina. June 9th, 1866. Information wanted. Charles Metz wishes to hear from his family. His wife's name is Jane, and his children are named Margaret, Drusilla, Elizabeth, and Chas Henry. He has not seen them for 10 years. He last heard from them when he was in the rebel army. They were at Columbia, South Carolina. He could not get a chance to go to see them. He came on to Philadelphia and is now living here. Baptist ministers at Columbia, South Carolina will please make inquiry concerning the above family. All information will be thankfully received by addressing Chas Metz, care of R.A. Black, Christian Recorder Office, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. July 14th, 1866. Information wanted. Lewis Wade wishes to learn the whereabouts of his wife, Lucy, and 3 children, named respectively Benjamin, Harriet, and Charlotte. He left them in 1850, they then being in Rockbridge County, Virginia. He belonged to William Thompson, while his wife and children belonged to James Watts. Any information respecting them will be thankfully received by the subscriber at Chatham, Canada West, and heaven will bless the hand that guides the wanderers home. Chatham, Canada West. August 11th, 1866. Information wanted. Phoebe Ann Jackson, formerly Phoebe Nicholas, is desirous of informing her brother Thomas G. Nichols of Galveston, Texas, of her location in Richmond, Virginia. Her proper name was Nichols. She was called Robertson, her eldest brother being known by that name. In the family, besides her father and mother, there were 12 brothers and 3 sisters. Nancy and Peter Robertson were sold to New Orleans. Brother Samuel went to Georgia. Mother could only learn that Francis and Thomas were on the same boat. Mother and father have since died, as also our stepfather, whose name was Africa Haynes. Address, Phoebe Ann Jackson, 1015 Marshall Street, corner 11th, Richmond, Virginia. September 22nd, 1866. Information wanted. Information wanted of the whereabouts of my husband, Richard Jones, and my 2 sons, John and Thomas. We were separated in the woods near a place called Allywhite in November 1862. I was carried back to Suffolk, by the Union troops. I have heard nothing of them since. We were owned by Burvin Jones of Smithfield, Suffolk, I can do this, County, Virginia. I am the granddaughter of old Tom Pete Wilson. I am much in want at this time. Ministers will please read this notice in the churches. Matilda Jones, direct to Anthony Bowen, agent, Christian Recorder, number 85 East Street between 9th and 10th Island, Washington, D.C. November 17th, 1866. Information wanted. Information wanted of Sylvie Lynch, wife of Sandy Lynch, who was carried away from Carolina County, Virginia, by her master, William Goodman, in 1862. Her maiden name is Sylvie Wilkins. She took with her 3 children. The name of the eldest is Jane, the next eldest is Henrietta, and the youngest is a boy named Alexander. When my wife was taken away, I was in the army, performing the duties of a servant. My wife was formerly claimed as the property of one Nicholas Wilkins. She is of the Baptist persuasion. Any information concerning her whereabouts will be thankfully received from anyone who will please address a letter to Sandy Lynch, care of Reverend J.R.V. Thomas, Box 90, Portsmouth, Virginia. March 23, 1867. Information wanted. Information wanted of John and Lavina Teamer, or Temo, who were sold in 1853 from Richmond, Virginia by one John Lindsay, formerly of Fortress Monroe, Virginia. John was 9 years old and Lavina 8 at the time of the sale. Their mother, Sarah, was sold by the same party to Rosenfield of Richmond, Virginia. It was thought that they were sold to Texas. Ministers of the Christian Church will please inquire as any information of the parties will be thankfully received by their father, George Timo, Portsmouth, Virginia, P.O. Box 152. November 2nd, 1867. Information wanted. Canton, Indiana, October 19th, 1867. John Granson and Albert Thurston Robinson, brothers, aged respectively about 16 and 13 years, were sent from Missouri to Kentucky in the year 1863. Andrew Robinson of Clay County, Missouri, was the owner of the boy's father, Coyd Robinson, whose wife, Frances, was owned by Whitten Drew of the same county and state, and after his death fell to his son, Dolphin Drew, who, in 1860, sold her to a man by the name of Pitcher, the former owner of her mother. This man formerly lived in Platte City, Platte County, Missouri. Albert, the youngest boy, was brought to Kentucky in August 1863 by Dolphin Drew's wife, a nurse for her babe. John, the elder boy, and his sister, Mary Eliza, with several others, were sent there a few months later to the care of Washington Gordon, Logan County, Kentucky. From thence they came back here a few months since, intending to get back to Missouri as soon as possible, but the parents may be elsewhere now. A kind, elderly colored man by the name of Peter Garland has voluntarily taken charge of them, and placed them in comfortable but transient homes, but they wish very much to be united to their relatives. Susan Trueblood. P.S. If anyone should wish further information, they can write to me, and I will give it, if possible. My address is Canton, Washington County, Indiana. May 8th, 1869. Information wanted. Of my son, Charles Blackwell. He was sold for me in Lancaster County, Virginia, 10 years ago, when quite young. He was sold from the estate of Mr. Joseph Beacom to Mr. Lewis Dix, and then taken to Mississippi. I am an old man, and need the companionship of my son. Any assistance in securing information of his whereabouts will be thankfully received. Ministers in Mississippi and throughout the entire country will please read in their churches. Address information to my address, Lewis Blackwell, Lancaster Courthouse, Virginia. April 2nd, 1870. Information wanted. Information wanted of Sarah Williams, who I left at Halifax Courthouse, Virginia, about 25 years ago. She belonged to a man whose name was William Early, who kept a dry goods store. Any information of her will be thankfully received by her sister, Martha Ann Good, who was taken away from Nathan Dexter, who kept a hotel at Halifax at 12 o'clock at night when quite small and sold in Alabama, but who now lives at 225 Current Alley, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. NB ministers in the South, please read in your churches. July 2nd, 1870. Information wanted. Of my sisters Jeanette, Eliza, Caroline, America, and Elizabeth, and of my brother Harry. Also of our mother, whose name was Dinah Hickson. They were sold from Liberty, Missouri, over 30 years ago, and the last time I heard of them, they were on the Red River. They belonged to Andy Hickson, and were sold to a man named Francis Benware. Any information of these parties will be gladly received by Moses Hickson. Now Moses Sisney, St. Joseph, Missouri, Box 507. NB pastors of churches will please read this. December 10th, 1870. Information wanted. Of my mother Isabella and my sister Sally, and of my grandmother named Mina. I left them in Georgia about 30 years ago. They belonged to a man named Joe Marshall. My mother belonged to a man named William Bell. They lived near Greenbrier Meeting House. Any information, address Jasmine Bell, Helena, Arkansas. And that's it. I hope you guys found this, sort of interesting. Just sort of some primary sources of some former slaves looking for their families, and how they went about doing that through sort of newspaper sources. Let me know how you feel about, this sort of format, about, reading primary sources that I don't really get to put into a video, or just sources I find interesting on their own. Then, trying to put a video around it would, sort of hurt the interesting content. But yeah, stay tuned for more Primus Academy, and thanks for watching.